don't know the answer to that. Turn 6. Call the meeting to order. Those that care to, please stand for an opening prayer and pledge of allegiance. Mr. Franklin, would you lead us in prayer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let us pray. Lord, this evening we would like to show our gratitude and give thanks in this opportunity to service our community. We would like to thank you for this common interest in our city and its ability to bring us together regardless of our differences. We are grateful to the people that make this community great, their trust in our process, and grateful in the ability in each and every one of us to do the right thing at the right time for the right reason. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Thank you very much for being here tonight. Appreciate you taking time out of your evenings to come and be a part of our civic engagement. I'd like to start things off with citizen participation. Anyone wishing to speak to something that is not on the agenda, please approach the podium and you will be given 3 minutes to speak. Is there anyone wishing to speak on something that is not on the agenda tonight? Seeing nothing, I will close citizen participation. We will move on to the consent agenda. These are items number 1, 2, and 3 on the agenda. I need a motion and a second for the approval of the consent agenda.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 6-0. We've got a lot of things coming up, folks, so please mark your calendars accordingly. We have a planning and zoning meeting on November 13th, 2023. City Council next week, November 14th, 2023. City Council workshop next Thursday, November 16th, 2023 at noon here. Planning and zoning meeting December 4th, 2023. The Board of Adjustments meeting has been canceled on December 7th, but there is another City Council meeting on December 12th, 2023. Moving on to old business and tablable items, I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 2350 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 6-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council approving the final plat of the Hills of Old Savannah subdivision.
Thank you, ma'am. Any updates from staff?
No updates.
Any questions, comments, or discussion from council on this issue? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion and a second for the final passage of Bill 23-50.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We will now take a roll call vote on our computers. Ordinance carries by a vote of 6-0. Moving on to item number 5 on our agenda. This is 23-51. I need a motion and a second for the second reading of Bill 23-51 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 6-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council authorizing the city administrator to execute a developer agreement with the Republic R3 School District for installation of certain infrastructure at the site of the new Republic Intermediate School.
Thank you, ma'am. Any updates from staff? Thank you. Any questions, comments, or discussion from council? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion and a second for the final passage of Bill 23-51, please.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We will now take a roll call vote on our computers. Thank you, ma'am. Ordinance passes by a vote of 6-0. Moving on to item number 6 on our agenda, this is the mayor's announcements, specifically a resolution of the City Council appointing a council member for Ward 2 And just to update everybody, I had the opportunity to interview 8 outstanding individuals, and I don't say that lightly. I mean, truly, it was remarkable to spend. It was a Friday afternoon, so I'm not going to lie. By the end, I was a little punchy, but I spent from Friday from 1 to 5 interviewing 8 really interested individuals. However, my goal was to have somebody selected for your consent and advice tonight for the empty city council seat. That is not happening. That's not happening for a couple of reasons. Number one, there was a legal issue that I have counsel looking into about a specific question I had. I just wanted to make sure I dotted all my I's and crossed my T's. But number two, we have a budget issue coming up, and I didn't feel like it was fair to throw somebody on council to vote on a budget they hadn't reviewed. So my goal now, and I think it's a realistic one, is next Tuesday at the next city council meeting, we will be able to present someone for your review and consent. I will say that it is my fault that I did not reach out to every single one of the city council candidates to let them know, and I've asked Laura to send my apologies to all of them via email first thing in the morning, because it was my goal to get something done tonight, and we've missed that goal. So I'm going to table this until the next meeting, unless there are any questions or concerns about that. I probably said more than anybody wants me to say about it. All right. Seeing nothing, I will move on to item number 7. This is new business. I would entertain a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 23-52 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 6-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council approving execution of a deferred infrastructure developer agreement with Bester Properties LLC.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Tabor.
Good evening, Chris Tabor, Principal Planner for the Buildings Department. Staff is seeking the council's approval to enter into a developer's agreement with Bester Properties LLC, the developer. They are looking to allow the deferral of construction of 1,593 feet of 5-foot wide sidewalk that would go along the north is to the left when you're looking at that. So it would be along the western side of that property.
Well, that's got to be driving you crazy that north is left.
It's really hard without a pointer.
Yeah.
So on the west side of that property, the sidewalk that they're deferring would go from the northern point of that property all the way down to the connecting point of Emerald Valley Phase 1. So they are looking to exchange the deferral of that and to final plat 25 lots of Harper's Ridge Phase 1 in exchange for securing $71,724.97, which is the total estimated cost of the sidewalk for the construction there. This property was originally preliminary platted, as you can see there, as Emerald Valley. Can you go back one, Michael? So this was originally preliminary platted as Emerald Valley Phase 2. The section on the left there is 92 lots that we originally had issued an infrastructure permit for. So the developer has gotten 25 of these lots serviceable by the infrastructure that's built on the site. And so they're asking to go ahead and final plat those lots, which, you know, a lot of times we let people break these up by phases. 92 lots is a particularly large phase to have tackled. So they're looking to start to recoup some of that investment and do that. In exchange, they'll defer that piece of that sidewalk, and we will take the money for the sidewalk in exchange. The work on site has progressed to the point where all 25 of these lots, as I mentioned, can be served by the roads, the water, and all the sewer and detention. And the agreement would allow final platting of these lots in exchange for the securing. Final platting allows for the lots to be sold, and then it would also allow us to take building permits for those 25 lots. Staff is recommending approval of the developer's agreement.
Thank you, sir. Do we have questions from council on this issue?
Mr. Mayor, I'm
Sir.
still just a little bit confused in the direction of that. Could you point it out on
Do we
the?
have the pointer right there?
Sorry,
Like by
your whole left is north thing has got me thrown off.
Yeah.
Don't point it in their eye.
This is working.
There we
Ah,
go.
There
me.
That's you. Ruben.
Wait, I just saw something. Oh, wait, there.
Okay, I got it. I got it. All right, so this is Main Street.
Okay.
This is the northern edge of the property. This is the preliminary platted property here. Down this way, you can see lightly there Garnett Drive. That's the existing phase 1 of Emerald Valley.
Okay.
So this is a new, what was originally platted as a new phase of Emerald Valley. They're, you know, obviously they're exercising their right to change the name at the final subdivision to Harper's Ridge. So that's one of the things that makes this confusing. The other piece is just that this portion here is what we've actively got under an infrastructure permit. And if you go to the next one, please. What you see here is what's being taken in by the city. This would be the final plat that we would allow, which is the next issue that both connect.
Okay. I can see it better now on that one. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir.
so what is the purpose behind deferring the sidewalk?
So usually we would require that construction. The short answer is the purpose is it allows them to plat that faster. It allows them to go ahead and make that connection, or to go ahead and make that connection at a later date when all of those lots are completed and to start building houses sooner. This particular project, I don't think anybody working on it would disagree that they've had trouble. There's been a ton of rock out there. And so that's a constraint that not everybody can predict.
Right.
So they're just looking to phase this out in a smaller piece and then defer that cost. Obviously, the $71,000 is held by the city. The agreement would expire in October of 25. If at that point the sidewalk had not been built, then the city would go ahead and build it.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, please remember this is a first read, so if you have any questions, get with staff before the next meeting. Moving on to item number 8, this is 23-53. I would entertain a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 23-53 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 6-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council approving the final plat of the Harper Ridge Phase 1 subdivision.
You're on a roll. Keep going.
So the Buildings Department is requesting approval of the final plat for Harper Ridge, Phase 1. Seen there. So this plat would legally divide 10.17 acres of land into 25 lots, and it includes 2 detention areas. The project was originally preliminary platted as Emerald Valley Phase 2. You go ahead and move to the actual plat. Thanks. Since that plat, the developers exercised their right to choose a new name for the subdivision. The final plat conforms to the preliminary plat for Emerald Valley Phase 2 approved October 26, 2021. Please be aware that the passage of this final plat is contingent upon the passage of the preceding developers agreement that we mentioned. And that's because the infrastructure permit that we issued to be built to completion does require that sidewalk to be done. So if that deferral does not go through, neither does the final plat. The Buildings Department has reviewed and is recommending approval of the final plat and has determined that it conforms to the requirements of the approved preliminary plat and to the city's final plating code. We're recommending approval.
Questions from council? Was there anything weird about this? Obviously, you said earlier there was rock out there. Was there anything else unusual about this process to get to the final plat that sticks out unusual on this project?
No, I'd say what was unusual is just simply how long they've been out there chipping away at the rock. Also, there's a house that's closer in proximity to that detention basin on the north that kept them from blasting, which is, a typical way you can remove rock quickly.
Right.
So they didn't have access to that for a good portion of this.
Is there any concern about them chunking it up into smaller portions to do this? Is that
No.
something that's causing the city concern?
No, what they've got here is the portion that is most appropriate to chunk out if they had phased it to begin with. The city's, we're going to get the deferral of the secured finance for the sidewalk. So I personally don't have any concerns with it.
Any questions given my questioning? All right. Seeing none, please remember this is a first read. Get with staff before the next meeting. Moving on to item number 9 on our agenda, I would entertain a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 23-54 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 6-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the
Plat for Hankins Farm. The final plat would create 3 commercial use lots and 10 industrial approved February 22nd, 2022. The Buildings Department has reviewed and is recommending approval of the final plat and has determined it conforms with the requirements of the approved development plan and the city's final plating code.
Questions for Mr. Tabor? Seeing none, I understand that Mr. Lee is here and would like to speak on this issue as well.
Just if anybody has questions.
Very good. Do we have any questions for Mr. Lee? All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here. All right. Please remember, this is first read. Get with the staff if you have any questions about this issue. Moving on to item number 10 on our agenda, I would entertain a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 23-55 by title only.
Motion.
Second.
A motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 6-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council authorizing amendment of the lease agreement between the city and City Utilities of Springfield, Missouri for the trunked radio system tower located in Republic, Missouri.
We are graced by Chief Compton.
Good evening. All right. Radio tower we're talking about for reference sets at the wastewater plant. So it's that tall tower that's about 600, I think some plus 600 feet tall. The guide wires that come down. How that got there was early 2000, 99, 2000, 2001. They did an assessment of the radio system in Greene County, and they wanted to get all of the users, Republic, Sheriff's Office, Springfield PD, Fire Department, on one system. They identified Republic as a site to put a tower, and it is a benefit for us having this tower here because it works on a repeater system similar to how your cell phone works. Various towers stationed all over Greene County. So if this tower wasn't here, we would have to talk into Springfield to hit a radio tower there. And during times, it may not work, and especially in times if we're in Christian County or police departments down there, sort of a warrant or in a pursuit or something, you can lose radio communication. So having this tower here is a huge benefit. There are 2 parts of this agreement. There is the actual lease for the tower to set on the property. That's not what we're talking about tonight. What we're talking about tonight is the assignment that allows City Utilities of Springfield to have a company manage the tower and do maintenance and possibly sublease space off that tower for them. And that's what they want to modify in this ordinance. They're very picky about subleasing who they sublease to because of the frequencies that our radio operates on and the cell phones and the other stuff operate on. They do not want any interference because it would have the potential to wipe out the entire system the way it's designed. So they're wanting to go to a different, I think the name of the company was Vertical Bridge is the company that's they're wanting to do the assignment to.
Do you recommend this?
Sure.
We have a resounding sure.
Yes.
Do we have questions from council about this issue? Yes, sir.
So it says on installation cost, who foots the cost of the? It says
Trust
on
me,
it just
we're
says on
not.
there, it says it would save on installation cost of the system.
Yeah, so when they signed the original lease to put it on our property, it was either find a piece of city property or they were going to have to buy a piece of property or potentially lease some. Just like the cell phone companies do. You see those towers all over the country. So as oddly as this sounds, our wastewater plant is up on a really high plane, which is not good. It's really good for the radio tower because this tower is the only one they have in the system that can talk directly to Jefferson City without going through other repeaters. They can signal radio signal in there. But that's how they got to where they are, because they've started looking at ground and what the city had. And so we let them on our property, which saved them installation costs.
Thanks. Other questions? Mr. Franklin?
Not a question, just a statement. I've always seen that tower out there and always been curious as to its exact purpose, and that's pretty impressive. That all of the different things that it does for us. So I appreciate you sharing that with us and
Sure.
learning what that giant tower does now.
All right, please remember this is a first read. If you have any questions, get with staff before the next council meeting. Moving on to item number 11 on the agenda, I would entertain a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 23-56 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 6-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council appropriating from the revenue of the City of Republic, Missouri, expenditures in accordance with the fiscal year 2024 budget of the City of Republic, Missouri, and providing for adjustments thereto.
Thank you, ma'am. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. Bob Ford, Finance Director. Tonight, we're going to talk about the budget again as a follow-up to last Thursday evening. And staff is recommending approval of the fiscal 24 budget as presented. I'd like to walk us through a summary of our discussion from last Thursday. Feel free to jump in and ask questions as we go. But as a reminder, we have separated the budget this year into two components, the operating component and the capital component. So the operating budget, as we see from the summary page here, is showing total revenues of $37.5 million for next year and expenses of $34.6. Remember that within the context of the city, there are things that we allocate to the various departments from the general fund that gets treated as revenue for the general fund and expense for the individual departments. So we've broken that out and shown that as an internal revenue source and an internal expense. You'll notice that the internal revenues and expenses net against themselves, getting us to an operating surplus of $2.8 million for the upcoming fiscal year. If we take a next step into our capital budget is twice the size of our operating budget as proposed for next year. From a capital expenditure perspective, we have $64.6 million in our capital budget, and that capital budget is really made up of the lion's share is the wastewater project. You'll notice from the left-hand side of this schedule that the wastewater project is $51.9 million in fiscal 24 of the $64.6 total capital expenditure. In addition to the wastewater project, the next largest project would be the Parks and Rec project tied to the pool expansion in the J.R. Martin Park. You add those two components together, it's about $6.3 million. Schuler Creek is another $2 million. And then we've got a smattering of other capital expenditures that make up the difference. The important thing here is that how are we going to fund this? And so that $64.6 million is funded from three sources. One, cash from our balance sheet. Two, we've got some special tax funds that provide some de minimis funding. And then there's also grants and reimbursements, primarily from the state, tied to the wastewater project. So specifically, you'll recall that cash from our balance sheet, the lion's share of that is coming from two sources. We did a bond offering in 22, and the Series 22 bond offering generated $45 million. We used about $5 million of that to build the Bills building. That left us about $40 million to be able to move forward and apply that against the wastewater project. We also did a bond offering in March of this year, $10 million for the Parks and Rec project, specifically for the pool expansion, as well as some additional work that is going to be done on the J.R. Martin Park in terms of upgrades and improvements. So the predominant amount of cash that's coming from our balance sheet is coming from those restricted accounts. There is some de minimis amount, a couple of $1 million coming from our unrestricted accounts. But once again, of that $33 million coming off our balance sheet, about 30.5 of that is really coming from those two restricted accounts, specifically the Parks and Rec bonds as well as the wastewater bonds. You'll also recall from our discussion last week that the grants and reimbursements are specifically the monies that have been identified by the state as matching grants. So there's two tranches of money. There's a $25 million tranche. That's a 70-30 match from the state. It's really ARPA funds that flows through the state. And then there is a 50-50 match that really is tied to the general revenue fund of the state. So that $30 million that you see as being reimbursed or as a source of cash coming from grants and reimbursements, the lion's share of that is really coming from those two state grants. So if you add all the components up, start with revenues minus the operating expenses, we get to our operating surplus of $2.8 million. And then we spend $64.6 million, but we fund that with cash from our balance sheet, special tax funds, as well as grants and reimbursements. We end up with a net surplus on a consolidated basis projected for fiscal year 2024 of $2.9 million. Now it's important, and we talked a lot about this last Thursday, that we're seeing our cash in this environment go from about $58 million down to about $28 million bucks. Remember that the lion's share of that cash is really coming from our restricted accounts, specifically those two bond transactions, those two bond funds that are restricted for one purpose and one purpose only. The Parks and Recreation bonds are to be used for the purpose we've identified for pool expansion in the J.R. Martin, as well as the wastewater project bonds are funding the wastewater project. So even though we see our cash balance diminishing over the period, that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to spend the money on those projects. Questions on the operating budget, capital budget. We'll spend a little more time talking about those specific capital projects in a moment or two. But this gives you the high-level overview of what fiscal 24 looks like. If not, moving on, I think. There we go. I'd like to spend a little time talking about the revenue side of the operating budget. You recall from last week, we talked quite a bit about this. 57% of the revenue that we're generating from an external source are coming from some form of tax. 42% of that 57% is coming from city sales taxes, the remainder are property taxes, and some additional Greene County taxes that flow our direction. So we're seeing little over $18 million coming in the form of tax as a source of revenue for the city for next year. The next largest bucket would be utility billing, specifically those those utility billing dollars can only be used for enterprise funds, both water and wastewater, but it represents about 24% of the total revenue in the operating budget. Then there's fees, licenses, rental, and program revenue. And the last but not least, we've got interest income of about $1.3 million, which represents about 4% of the operating side of the revenue on the operating budget for next year, to get us back to our total of $31.8 million of total external revenue. Here I've excluded that internal interdepartmental revenue that will get eliminated during the consolidation process when we do our audit. On the operating budget on the expense side, there was a question that came up by Mr. Wilson last week regarding, because we talked a lot about personnel costs, and we talked about where the city has come over the last 6 years. If in 2017, our total expense related to personnel was something just north of $6 million, and removing for 24, to a total expenditure of about $16 million. The question was, is that really doing what you want it to do? Is it slowing down turnover? Is it changing our turnover rate? Is it changing how people see the city that work for the city? I spent a little time chatting with Lisa and other HR folks about that specific topic. In general, our turnover rate over the last few years has come down, but we still have turnover. It's running about 8% a year. But more importantly, what we've done from an investment in our people perspective is that, one, it's helped us attract more talented individuals to the city, and then it's also a great retention tool that those individuals that potentially would have been looking elsewhere, because we have gotten our salaries more competitive, we've improved our retirement program. As you remember, we've got 9% the city contributes to the ICMA program, as well as the loggers pension contribution is 100% city funded now. All of those things have contributed to attracting new people and keeping new people, and people that we'd like to attract and keep. The one thing that we have heard over the last few years, if that we are lacking in any place, is that our dependent healthcare costs is too high. So those employees that pay for their incremental dependent healthcare costs for the city, they historically paid 100%. As we talked last week, we're moving that needle a bit, and as the city, we're going to pay 50% of that incremental dependent healthcare cost, thus relieving the burden on those employees that have their families and their spouses and children covered under our healthcare. Now they're only going to be responsible for 50% of that incremental cost. So we think by making that last change that we've addressed a lot of the issues that we've seen, or really the last issue that we've seen with regards to our employee body in terms of issues that they see with our compensation and benefit package. So hopefully that gives you an answer that is directionally sound with what you were looking for.
Yes.
Thank you. So on the operating side, as we talked last week or last Thursday evening, our personnel costs in total are about $16.4 million, or 57% of our total expense budget. Operating to run the operating expenses to run the city, another 23%. I think one of the things that we highlighted last week is that debt service with the new bonds that are in place, both the wastewater as well as the Parks and Rec funding bonds, we've got a debt service in the aggregate of about $5 million. That means that from a percentage perspective of our total operating budget, that's about 18%. And it's one of those things where a lot of things are variable in nature on the operating side. So there are things that we can tweak and cut and change on the expense side. That service is not one of those. We're committed, and it's an obligation. And there's a chart here we'll talk about in a little while. That obligation runs for quite a while. So that is one thing that I want to remind us, that we've got a significant debt service, and that it just, once again, as we talked last Thursday evening, I'm kind of mixing a couple of thoughts here, but because we are right now short on our wastewater project by $40 million, if we have to fund that project, that incremental gap, with debt, it's going to take that debt service to about 26% of our total operating budget. So no pressure, Mr. Cameron and Mr. Nelson. We really, the city, more grant money is really what we are hoping to see here. So once again, we've got, for 2024 base salaries, across the board, 4% cost of living is built into this budget. We aren't building in a merit increase because of all the things we've done over the last 3 or 4 years. So this is a year to keep whole with regards to cost of living. This is not a year to put more money into to merit increases. But it takes our base salaries to about 69% of our total comp expenditure. Healthcare, as I've said, historically the city has paid 100% of the employee-only cost. New for next year, the city will pay 50% of the incremental dependent healthcare costs going forward. Healthcare, ironically, is one of the smaller buckets of the total personnel costs. Retirement benefits end up being 13% of that total cost, whereas healthcare runs about 7%. In general, this gets us to an expense total on the operating budget of about $28.9 million for next year. And once again, ties back to that overview that we looked at earlier, which gets us to a $2.8 million operating surplus. Any questions on the operating budget, expense side, personnel issues? Have we answered all the questions regarding turnover or healthcare costs or anything along those lines? Hearing none, we will continue on. So, as we said, on the capital budget side, we're going to spend $64.6 million next year. This chart is I've collapsed the 2-pager from last Thursday night into one page. It's showing what the capital expenditure purpose is and then how it is being funded. So you can see, let's look at wastewater. We've got, on the wastewater side, we've got the wastewater project itself, and $23.7 million of the 52 is being funded out of the Series 22 bond proceeds, whereas $28.2 million of the $52 million is being funded from those state grants that we talked about. So once again, this chart breaks up, this is the project, this is where we're going to spend it, this is how we're going to fund it, and in total, we're going to spend $64.6 million. Suffice this to say, between cash on the balance sheet, those monies that are coming from the state in terms of those 2 tranches that we've already identified, we are 100% funded on the source side to fund the use side of the capital budget. I'm going to sort of finish the discussion, or at least the summary, with regards to our debt summary. As you recall from Thursday's discussion, we were going to end this year, that year of 2023, somewhere in the neighborhood of $61.8 million of debt outstanding. We'll end next year somewhere around $60.5 million of debt outstanding. But once again, I think the crucial point here is to look at the debt service, both principal and interest, that we're obligated to for this upcoming year. And then if we look at this last page on the debt service side, I've highlighted 2 areas. One, the debt service for next year and how it's broken out across all the various debt types of debt that we've got. And then also I've highlighted in green, this is sort of the crossover year. This is a point at which all of our debt is paid except for the Parks and Rec bonds and the wastewater. And you'll see there's still a significant debt service that we need to be cognizant of during those final years of the debt that we have outstanding. So once again, this is just a reminder that this is a pretty significant obligation the city has, and that it is not variable in nature, it's a fixed amount. So with that, I would like to say, given the fact that I'm going to go back to the first page and just remind us that we're still talking about fiscal 24 being in the black, $2.9 million at the end of next year. That cash then will flow back into the various departments that have generated the excess cash. And from a net income perspective, that'll put us back in a positive light for 24. So staff is recommending that you approve this budget as presented for fiscal 24.
Thank you, sir. Questions from council on this issue? Seeing none, I have to say outstanding work. This is clear, it's concise. We're dealing with some problems and we're doing the best way we can to fix it. So thank you for your efforts here.
You're quite welcome.
Please remember, this is a first read of the budget. We will have the final vote on it next week. So if you do think of a question between now and then, get with staff. Moving on to item number 12 on our agenda, I would entertain a motion and a second for the first reading of Bill 23-57 by title only, please.
Motion.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries by a vote of 6-0. Madam Clerk.
An ordinance of the City Council amending Title 8 Fees, Chapter 805, Section 805.010, Credit Card Processing Fee, 805.030, Alcoholic Beverages, 805.040, Animals, 805.050, Buildings and Zoning, 805.060, Business, 805.070, Fire Protection and Prevention, 805.080, Parks and Recreation Fees, 805.090, Special Event Fees, and 805.100, Utility Administration of the Municipal Code of the City of Republic, Missouri.
You kind of wished we broke those up, don't you?
I knew it was coming, so I just wrote it that way, sadly.
I believe this is a tag team between Mr. Keeling.
Yep. Happy to start. And Andrew is here for anything bills, and I'm here for anything Parks and Rec. Really here to answer questions. But on the Parks and Rec side, I do want to call out one particular set of fees, which we've actually had a lot of interest in and a lot of questions on already, and that is in regards to our new aquatic facility, our expanded aquatic facility. There have been a lot of questions about what are the rates and the fees are going to be. So those are outlined in this document, but I want to take a minute to cover those. So as we set upon the first year of the expanded aquatic center, and we're going to present later, but it is forever going to be known as of 1/1/24 as the Rush Republic Aquatic Park. So as we rebrand the facility and we expand the facility, and there's a whole lot more amenities and a whole lot more to offer, as you can imagine, operating costs have gone up. We're more than doubling our staff, but there's other things in regards to chemicals, utilities, et cetera. So when the quarter-cent sales tax passed to build the facility, that's exactly what it was for. It pays the principal and interest payments on the facility to construct the facility and then pay it off over 25 years. It's on us to create the revenue at the front gate to pay for all the operations. So in a roundabout way, what I'm getting ready to say is our daily admission fees, which is probably the most asked question we've got so far, are going up from the stated $7 in the fee schedule to $10 for a resident, and the stated that help me out, Jennifer, I just went blank. $8 for non-resident to $13. If we've heard anything over the last 5 or 6 years, we would like to see a larger resident discount. And also, we would like to keep those season pass fees low. And we've been able to do that. You can see in our fee schedule, while the daily admission fee is proposing to rise for $3 for a resident, our season pass fee has remained remarkably low. So if you do all the math, and if you're a regular attendee of the Aquatic Center, now known as the Rush, if your family visits that facility 6 times in a year, the season pass more than pays for itself, and after that, you'll be in the black, if you will, on that. So that's the most frequently asked question we've had in regards to the daily admission fees for the new facility. Those are for your consideration, set at $10 for resident and $13 for non-resident.
Did you do any research on what other, and I know we're not going to be able to compare our new facility to other places,
Yeah.
but how much does it cost to go to Ozark or Nixa if it's open, or
Sure. Love the question. And locally, regionally, we really don't have a direct thing that we can compare to. But we've done a lot of Midwestern type things all the way to Carmel, Indiana, Independence, Missouri, and we are right in the ballpark of where those facilities are. And when you really look at around entertainment offerings in 417 land, I mean, I'll name some crazy things here, but you go to pay mini putt, it's $10 to $15. So we really feel like the entertainment value, especially duration of stay. Our average duration of stay, if you talk to our aquatics folks who chart this kind of stuff, is about 2.5 hours to 3 hours. So when you consider that versus a $10 admission fee or a $13 admission fee, we really feel that's a fair price. But directly to your question, especially now, even before, but especially now, it's hard to gauge because those municipal aquatic facilities are at $6, $7, similar to what we are. But you can see it in our branding. We're really no longer a municipal aquatic facility. We are more of a water park. When I show you pictures here in a minute, you can really see it. Is that footprint is dramatically expanded, and what we have to offer, I believe, is dramatic. I was one of those at first. I'm like, $10? But then I got to thinking about everything else I do with my daughter, and I'm like, that's still pretty cheap. And especially given all the things we have to offer there, I really think the fees are reasonable, and I hope the public will as well.
Other questions on this issue?
Mr. Mayor,
Sir.
I just had what's a rush hour?
So I love that. Great question. So we're going to name the facility the Rush. We went through some branding things through Rebel Advertising. We're so excited about that, and we'll show the logo in a minute. But what our staff did, and that's another thing to kind of keep rates low. So from 5 to 7 p.m. daily, we're going to call this thing the Rush Hour, and you can get it at a discounted rate for $7. So twilight hours, if you will, the last 2 hours of every day, $7. Feel like that's more than a reasonable rate for a couple hours. So it's another way to offer a discounted rate if you don't want to come for the whole day and pay the $10 or $13. So
Okay.
I really feel like that's a fair price as well.
And one more question. So that daily admission fee, that covers everything, the Lazy River, everything except for the HUNA?
That's correct. There's
Okay.
an add-on fee for that, and that's what's a little bit of strategy. There's the HUNA doesn't interest everybody, and rather than charge everybody that thing, and we have die-hard HUNA riders, as you can imagine. The people that want to go on the ride should pay the fee, and we do a $5 all-day admission fee. It is $5 for 2024, correct? Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
A lot of red lines on here through fall soccer programs for kids. Does that mean they are eliminated completely?
I'm going to let Jennifer answer those questions.
No, I just combined because the prices are the same,
Cool.
so I just put.
Just
them all
making
the
sure.
same.
Thanks, man.
Do you want to talk for a while?
Sure. I mean, now that the boring stuff's done, I can talk about wastewater and water if you like. On the building side and permitting side, you'll see there's a lot of fees that we've gone from a fee that we've tried to keep up with the cost. For example, like signs. We install the signs in new subdivisions. Normally, we set a fee and say this is the cost per sign. Metal being a commodity, it's hard to keep up with that. So we've gone to in swings in both direction. I'll say that. Sometimes it's too high, sometimes we're too low, mostly too low, but we're going to a direct reimbursement. So whatever it costs us to install those signs, that's what we're going to bill to the developer for those on the subdivision. Just for information, a HIP stop sign is not a cool stop sign. It's high intensity prismatic reflective, if you care. When it comes to permitting fees, we've kind of looked at our fee relative to the neighboring cities. We've adjusted them up. It has to do with the cost and number of inspections that we do per fee. So if there's any questions directly with any of those, I'm happy to answer them. Utility billing. So I want to call out the water and wastewater rates. The 5-year rate implementation was approved 2 years ago when we issued the debt for the wastewater plant. So the strike through is really updating for 2024 what was, and that's called out at the bottom of the table for the 5-year duration. That's all I have. I'll answer
Any questions? Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate it. If you have questions, get with staff before the next meeting. And that concludes our scheduled business, but we will turn it over to reports from staff. Mr. Keeling.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to reiterate the work of Bob and Jake on the 2024 budget. I know personally how much work that is, and our department heads as well. Great job. That is a big, big task to make everything balance and get one thing in a basket and put it in another basket. So great work on that. Candidate filing reminder. I'll let Laura cover this one.
December 5th is opening day, so we will open at 8. We'll take filings all day, so I will be open 8 to 5 that day
We're
at City Hall.
Okay.
Any day after that through the 26th is by appointment only. We will be closed on the 25th for Christmas, and we'll be closed on the 26th until 3 p.m. We'll be open 3 to 5 per state law. That's it.
Thank you, ma'am. There's some really cool things happening out there. I'm sure you noticed the water tower being painted. I know Mr. Cameron mentioned it at the last meeting, but the curtain is off and you can kind of see all what's going on there. Andrew, I don't want me to put you on the spot, but those cell towers are temporary, and is it going right back? Or no? Okay. Okay. And then the roundabout, if you haven't been out there, the roundabout adjacent to the battlefield at ZZ and Elm Extended Farm Road 182, the traffic pattern is already there. Now, granted, they're by no means done, but they're working quickly, and that will be a tremendous addition to our community. So really happy with that project. That is a MoDOT project. Would we have anything to do with that?
We do not. One thing to note, they're constructing the extended portion of the Stewart Creek Trail, so from the roundabout north to the high school. They're getting ready to start on a 10-foot concrete trail that will extend from the battlefield up to the high school. Tied into the park, Stewart Creek Trail project.
And finally, I did want to just take a couple minutes to highlight the Republic Aquatic Center expansion project. We're about halfway through construction. And as you can imagine, the project has drawn a lot of interest, not only from our immediate citizens, but we receive a lot of phone calls from neighboring departments, really 4 state region departments about this facility, how it was brought about, and it was brought about by our citizens passing the sales tax. But logistics of it, anything you could imagine. But just going back this was how the facility sat prior to construction beginning. The facility was built in 2005. Opened to the public in 2005, constructed in 2004, brought about by a sales tax as well. But still tremendously proud of that facility and what it means to this Republic area. Tried and true. When we opened the doors in 2005, we were close to 58% of non-residents. It's dipped to about 52%, but it's a tremendous sense of pride for our public community. It brings in visitors. We had about 60,000 people visit the facility in 2023, which is our biggest year on record. But as you can imagine, it brings in visitors consistently in a 100-mile radius. So I don't want to discredit in any way, shape, or form what that facility is. Thanks to our maintenance team, we keep it up to the nines. It looks the part. It is the part. And if you visit it daily, you still feel like it's new. But as we look forward, and where the cool stuff starts coming in, is if you just look at that project as far as size and scope, it's big. If you go down there and walk the space, it feels even bigger. We were down there today. We were down there yesterday. It's cool to go down to. But I want to say thanks publicly to Branco. They've been terrific in working with the project. But just pointing out a few amenities here, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this little guy to work, but you can see the path and the layout of the Lazy River, 570 feet. All but the side of the right of the screen is done and shaped. To the left there, off the far bend of the river, is where the pump house, the pool house is going to be, lifeguard rooms, additional restrooms, additional concession opportunities. That large kind of square pit you see there will be the slide pit. There will be 2 slides coming off that, 35 feet in height, 1 tube slide and 1 body speed slide. And then we're entertaining the idea of doing some really cool things over here to the north, to the right of your screen, of creating this thing called the North Lawn, to where you can, if you want to break from aquatics, you can do like games like cornhole. Our staff has a really wild imagination, but I like that a lot. It's just you can get away from it a little while, go relax in the North Lawn. But I don't want to take away from the terraces too. There's so many cool facilities, and I could talk forever, and I've already been told I talk too much about this, but that's okay. But the terraces from the existing facility, there's 9 foot of elevation drop from the existing facility to the new facility. So in between that space, we're going to have these 5 terraces that you can rent out or just chill in and hang out on a terrace, and some really nice chairs. So the space and the view from there is going to be really, really cool. So the last thing I wanted to cover for this particular project is, well, there's 2 things. It is going to be called the Rush, Republic Aquatic Park. Really excited about that. That logo is not quite done, but we're getting close. Really excited to debut that on 1/1/24. We're going to debut the logo, the look, the everything, the pricing schedule, the structure, the rentals, and everything else on 1/1/24. But when we're done with construction, it's ultimately going to end up looking something like this. The landscaping will be to the nines. We did spend quite a bit of money in landscaping because we wanted it to look the part. As you can see, as you go around the Lazy River, and it goes, I get it wrong every time, clockwise, counterclockwise, whatever it is. We want to be able to block the vision a little bit to make the ride feel more private, but also to make it feel longer. As of right now, as it sits 570 feet, we think it's going to take around 90 to 100 seconds to float around there, and that's a good size Lazy River. Those slides coming up there 34 feet off the pool elevation should have a dramatic effect from Lennon Miller as well. So I wanted to cover this real quick, and I promise I'll be done. So this is taking the day. But I want speak a little bit about some things that are taking place not only at the Rush, but also in Miller Park to bring about the project. So this is how it sits today. So the question we've been asked a lot is, what about parking? And it's a really great question. So we are going to add a lot adjacent to the Cox lot immediately across from the Rush. That lot right there will hold somewhere around 40 to 50 cars. We made a change in our employee parking in 2023 that really helped us. So we honestly feel like this is going to be able to hold. And if it doesn't, we are prepared to block off a front portion of the community center as well. We have overflow parking at the baseball, softball fields. But we will be prepared. The first impression when people arrive is, do I have a good place to park? Do I have a place to park my vehicle? And we will be prepared for that. The second thing is a new admissions area. So we're going to take our existing breezeway and kiosk and demo it and turn our existing lifeguard room into a brand new admissions and ticketing area. There's a couple of real advantages to that. The one we have right now is located completely outdoors, exterior. All of our computer stuff subject to the elements, but the other part, more importantly, and on the finance side, is security. As you can imagine, taking in what we think will be $850,000 worth of revenue in that facility in 2024, we'll make sure it's secure for our own standpoints, but for our employees as well. So we're going to make a change to the existing facility for the guard room to take it to a new ticketing and admissions area. The facility rebranding will come in with new signage on the front, new signage on the Miller side. And then on the Miller Park side, and everyone is aware of these projects as well, but I do want to take a couple seconds. We're going to relocate the tennis courts from Martin Park to make room for that project here in Miller Park. We are going to work in a few pickleball courts here as well. There's going to be a new outdoor restroom structure. When I say that, we're going to take the existing structure that was there left over from the Saddle Club. It's nothing more than a metal barn. This has already been in the hands of the architects. It's going to turn into our outdoor restrooms. We need it now for trail walkers and everything, but we especially will need it. We have to have it if the tennis courts and pickleball areas are there. And finally, new trail connections. So if you've been over there lately, a portion of the trail is closed right now for the expansion. We are going to make that whole again, and then we're going to build new trail connections down to the tennis courts and restrooms. So I just want to make sure, we've been asked a lot of these questions at the front desk of the community center, but you may get them from your citizens and your constituents as well. I just want to make sure you guys have the right answers for that. But with that, that's all I have.
Frisbee golf.
Yep. Missed
Sorry,
on the, yeah.
Sorry, but that's a question I
So-
asked.
And it's an important one because there's been no less than 3 people in the community offered for private donations to help us with that. So we're going to take the Lucky 13 disc golf course. We have a slightly edited version of that now, but we included funds in the 2024 budget, and then we're going to pursue those private donations. But we're going to turn that into the nicest 9-hole disc golf course we can possibly make it. And that includes concrete tee pads, brand new baskets. If you look at that participation numbers at that disc golf course, it's actually crazy. I mean, there's almost always someone out there playing if the weather's nice, and we don't want to lose that in that park. The reason why disc golf got really crazy popular during COVID is it's free, right? And we could have the disc there at the front desk, so tremendously popular. But we want to do it. We want to do it right. So I can't remember who's leading the charge. I think Garrett's leading our team in that, but we're going to try our best to make the best 9-hole course we can make. And it won't be Lucky 13 anymore, or maybe we'll creatively name it something else, but it'll be a 9-hole course still located in Miller Park. So that was a lot of information, but I'm happy to answer any more questions.
Questions? Mr. Franklin?
Just a small question. It's not really aquatic center related, but Butterfly House grant that I heard recently, is this same area where that's going?
So tremendously special there. Not a grant, a private donation.
Private donation.
Yeah, so it's Mrs. Caldwell. Long story there that I don't want to get into, but in honor of her daughters, so she's gifting us the money in 2024 to build a Butterfly House. She's already given us money for the pavilion located behind Miller Park. Jennifer, you know the story better than I, and I do not want to mess it up, but her daughter unfortunately passed away at a very young age, so in honor of her, she donated the money for the small pavilion, but she came back to us again and said, hey, I want to do something more to get back to the community, and the story is incredible, but she gave us the money, or will give us the money, to construct a Butterfly House adjacent to the maintenance barn in Miller Park. We think we can get that done for somewhere around $3,000, I believe. Our maintenance team, as you can imagine, is charged up to make that happen, and especially in memory of a young girl who passed away. So we're going to do that right. So, but that's where that came from. So
Sure, absolutely. No, and I appreciate it. Hopefully I didn't get ahead of anything. I had seen that, so
Yeah.
yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? All right. Anything else to
That's it,
report? Reports from council. Mr. Franklin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Appreciate Mr. Ford and all your staff's work on the finance. It was a lot. I've looked at that several different ways from several different people, and I really appreciate the way you put that together and understanding a lot of that information. I really appreciate the huddle we had. I guess it was last week already. The presentation from Chief, a lot of great information, a lot of great Republic history, so I love all that. I didn't know about Jerry Poole and the fire department, so that was pretty neat to learn. Other than that, that was a great update. David's not here, but I appreciate everything that he shared with us as well at that huddle. Special thank you to Andrew and Mr. Lesby. Last week, I had a chance to go out and look at our wastewater facility. And if you haven't had a chance to do that, I highly recommend it. There's so much stuff out there that, we can see it on paper. I have an understanding of mechanical things and wastewater, but nothing like what I have now after going out there. It's a little bit intimidating. You get out there, the first thing, of course, is the smell. But you get past that pretty quick when you see all the cool stuff. A life preserver hanging on the railing was a little bit intimidating. But once you get up there, you realize how deep everything is. But that was a great tour. We got to look at our CIP stuff too, so I really appreciate that and seeing the progression of all that through our community. After seeing all that, it was really hard to top that. So that was a great week last week. But I'd also like to thank all of our veterans in our community, all of the veterans that serve, even the ones here at the city. I know a few of us. But I would just like to say a special appreciation and thanks to all the veterans in our community, and thanks to all the organizations that are recognizing our veterans this weekend. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Franklin. Any other reports from council? Seeing none, and as it is a beautiful night out there, and I desperately wanted to have this meeting outdoors, but